Hi, I'm James from Impractical Performance, and this is 80 Days Shell to Show, Episode 2. We have less than 50 days remaining, and so we really got to get a move on. In this episode, we're working on our full custom interior, and we're going to show you how we took these old beat-up seats that look like they're from the 70s, which they are, and show you how we turned them into these nice custom-looking seats that still maintain some of the original styling. So the first step was to take the seats off the foam and take the individual panels apart. Our seats were held onto the foam with hog rings and J-hooks. And because it's a 79, the driver and passenger seats are the same, so we only had to take one of the seats apart to make templates. Once we had the upholstery off the foam, we went along and ripped all the seams with a box cutter. This was probably the fastest and easiest step in the whole process. Once we had the individual panels, which equated to about 55 pieces total, we were ready to trace. We used wax tracing paper that came in a roll, and we found it pretty easy to work with. It lays flat and doesn't tend to rip. We also went ahead and labeled each one of these pieces and added some seam allowance where needed. If you don't add a seam allowance, you'll end up with a piece that is way too small and won't fit once sewn. Once the patterns were traced and cut out, it was time to move on to the fabric. We ended up having 3 different materials to cut: a foam backing, the black vinyl, and the purple suede. Similar to the way we traced on the wax pattern paper, we ended up using a black Sharpie to trace the wax paper onto the foam. For the vinyl and suede, we used tailor's chalk, which is basically a triangle with a tiny wheel at the tip, and it ends up leaving a nice thin line to cut on. The tailor's chalk ended up saving us a ton of time in the long run. Once we had all the pieces cut, we glued the vinyl and suede to the foam backing. We wanted to ensure it wouldn't separate, and this made our next step easier as the pieces were already fixed in place and were not able to move. We were fortunate with the ability to use an industrial sewing machine for this project. While this can be done with a standard sewing machine, you may have a greater chance of the fabric gathering or bunching, thread or needles breaking, along with other things. Once we had the foam glued, we went around and sewed the outside of every piece. Once the pieces were sewn, we were able to take all the purple suede pieces, which were our inserts for the seats, and mark the lines that we needed to make in order to give it its original look. We did this by lining them up to the original pieces, marking at the top and the bottom where the lines were, and then taking a yardstick and connecting those lines. We then took it over to the sewing machine and created the lines. Now that the fabric was sewn on the outside and the lines are sewn on the suede, we were able to go in and connect all the pieces. When connecting the pieces, it should always be pretty sides together, ugly sides facing out. We also had some vinyl piping we needed to add to these seats, so it ended up being fabric, piping, fabric. And along with the fabric being pretty side facing inward, you also want the vinyl piping to be facing pretty side in. We had a specific piping foot on this machine which forced me to have to shove everything through the middle of the machine. After all the work, you should get a unique and pretty awesome looking interior.
Yep.
Along with the seats, part of the interior we wanted to complete was painting the trim pieces. We started by removing anything that was removable, which included the fabric inserts, the carpet on the door cards, and things like air vents and the dash. We then washed and scrubbed all the pieces with a degreaser, let them dry, and gave them a rough sand. We then hit them with a light coat of paint, let it dry for about 15 minutes, then came back and hit them with a slightly heavier coat. Right here is a preview of our full custom interior. It's not quite done yet. We still need to make some adjustments to this back seat, but this bottom seat's pretty much dead on the money. We have about 40 hours in already, and we still have way more to go on this full custom interior, so stay tuned to see the full reveal.